You is recognized, Mr. Issa.
Well, let me do a follow-up on that. The census mandated by the Constitution should, in a pure constitutionally mandated sense, simply say how many people are here and ask no further question, because that would meet the requirement for who is where, correct?
And its base.
Okay, so isn't every question over and above that, and it's a long form, in fact, causing people to get bored, not happy with it, fill in the blanks quickly, and sometimes not pay a lot of attention? Isn't there essentially a loss every question you ask after the one that is required every 10 years by the Constitution? Just a yes or no if you can.
It's not that simple.
Well,
that
is a shorter form more likely to be answered accurately and returned in greater amounts?
The Bureau has found, and this is just in surveys in general, the shorter the form, the less burdensome.
Okay, so we're going to recognize that all questions have that effect. But let me go back over to the Census Bureau itself. Doctor, isn't it true about 42 million people have answered this question substantially just on the ACS?
That's correct.
Okay, so this is not something new and exotic. President Obama caused this to be asked. But in the opening statement of the ranking member, who I apologize, I guess isn't here right now, but he said no one has ever been compelled to answer this. Mr. Comstacker, one of you, is the ACS like voluntary? When I got a copy of it, it basically told me do it or else, right? Isn't that compelled, and even if not required by the Constitution?
You're correct, Congressman, that Congress has passed a law that says that you are required to answer the census.
So the ranking member was simply dead wrong, misinformed when he said that no one's been compelled. In fact, throughout our history, this question has been asked, and 42 million people, many of them during the Obama administration, answered this question. We're compelled to, correct?
Point of inquiry. Which statement is he referring to?
Would you please stop the clock, because I'm not yielding for a point of anything unless you stop the clock.
You're saying the ranking member's statement?
His opening statement said that no one had ever been compelled to do this before. I wrote it down as he did it.
I don't believe he said that. Let's double check his statement.
Well, you can certainly go back to the record.
Okay, his statement. Go check it. Go check it.
If I can reclaim my time, please. So, assuming that he said it or didn't say it, it is in fact mandatory, has been mandatory, and President Obama during his 8 full years caused the ACS to be sent out with this mandatory question which has been answered. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So except for politics, what has changed in the 8 years of this being asked by the Obama administration versus it being asked of everyone that you know of?
Well, I think the important point that the Department would make and the Bureau would make is that rather than focusing on the compelling people to answer the question, it's more importantly the data collected is confidential, and that's mandated by law as well that Congress passed. So this data is
bingo. That's why it wasn't political when it was being gathered during by the ACS. Well, let me ask a question. If it was good enough to be on the ACS and important enough to be asked 42 million times, and for Dr. Jarman, today with 42 million samples, are you in fact without the confidence that you know the figure, and if you flushed the figure of people answering that question against independent information and records, that you could come up with a accurate, reliable statement of how many citizens and non-citizens are in a particular location?
So I think the issue between having the question on either the old long form of the census or now on the American Community Survey is not an issue of the accuracy of those instruments. They are accurate to a certain level of...
But there is sampling on the ACS, yes. And on the full form, right. It would be 100% that you then would flush against other data.
So the Justice Department requested block-level information, and so the American Community Survey's sampling rate is simply not high enough to resolve down to that level.
So if you tried to use that information to help do your job, Mr. Gore's job in this case, you would be unable to because you could not assert that there was sufficient accuracy because of the small size of the sampling by block.
Right. So from the Census Bureau's technical review, we could not produce reliable block-level estimates using.
So the only way, if I can paraphrase, the only way to achieve what apparently was asked for by the Obama administration for 8 years with accuracy down to block level is to do what you're doing. Isn't that true?
I don't think that before it was asked for at the block level.
Right, but
now.
the information asked for 42 million times, many of them during President Obama's, much of them during President Obama's term, was not sufficiently accurate. It did not have enough statistical accuracy for it to be used at block level, which is what the Department of Justice asked for.
Yeah.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I thank the gentleman.
We'll now recognize the gentleman from New York and the gentleman from North Carolina.